Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Sister Jacinta, for bringing your entire class, and Deb, who actually works in a transitional living facility, runs a transitional living facility, which is kind of applicable, I think, to what some of you are doing with your project in this class. So I have worked with her over the years, referring some of the drug court clients that I worked with to her facility, which she's taken very good care of them and helped guide them on the right path. Just to give you a little bit of background on me, I know one of you and Sister Jacinta. So for the rest of you, my background was working in the criminal justice system. I had 18 years working in the prosecuting attorney's office. I started after college with a degree in criminal justice and then worked my way up to be the chief investigator of the prosecutor's office. So after 18 years of that, I kind of switched gears but stayed in the system, and I became a drug court probation officer and field officer. So I worked with the drug court program, which is under Allen Superior Court. I was responsible for case managing a number of clients that were referred to our program. I'm going to talk extensively about that program. But I was also a field officer, so I got to go out and check on the clients, make sure that they were in a safe, supportive environment. I also got to go to some of the transitional living facilities and check in with them there and kind of see what their progress was. So my talk today is basically about problem-solving courts, particularly drug courts, and how they are beneficial to the criminal justice system, not only for giving intense support and treatment to those individuals in the program, but also a cost savings, and how that can save you tax dollars when you are looking at the criminal justice system and the costs that are all involved with between law enforcement, the court system, and the correctional system. So I will move this along if I can figure out how to move it. Some of you may know about something that's called the War on Drugs that took effect primarily with the Nixon administration back in the 70s. But in the 80s, there was such a crackdown on substances, possessions, that our prisons were overcrowded, that they were just, they didn't know what to do with the prisoners because of the offenses that they were being charged with. They were getting what's called mandatory sentences. So the laws changed when someone was charged with a drug offense. They mandatorily gave them a fixed sentence. So that was causing overcrowding. That was also putting a lot of congestion in the court system. So in 1980, there were just about 500,000 individuals incarcerated in prisons around the United States. In 2015, that went to over 1.5 million in a very short period of time because of the sentencing for drug offenders in the system. In Indiana, currently there's over 27,000 incarcerated in our prison system right now. So when you look at the difference between state and federal prisons, the federal prison system, 46% of the prisoners in the federal system are there for drug offenses. So to break that down, you've got 59% of those are females and 49% of those are males. Does it surprise you that the female population is a little higher than the male population? Yes.
Is that there's more females than males, or of the females, there's a bigger percentage of the females in that? You know what I'm saying?
I think I know what you're saying. With the actual population in federal prisons, 46%, almost half of those are drug offenders. Okay. The rest are some other type of offense for federal charges. Of those drug offenders, 59% are female. And 49% are male. So yeah, it's a higher percentage of female incarceration in the prison system for drug offenses. State prisons, they're only 16% are there for drug-related offenses. And 25%, again, higher percentage of the females as opposed to the males in the system. But still, that's a lot of people who are incarcerated for drug offenses.
Why is there such a difference between the federal and the state?
And I will get to that, but that's a really good question. In the federal system, there are a lot of, when I talked about the mandatory sentences, there are a lot of offenses that are drug-related that go federal. So high quantities of drugs, transporting drugs, those type of offenses, the federal government takes those quite frequently. The state prison system, there's alternatives. So they could go more likely to probation or just a short term in jail. The difference between the jails and the prisons, jails typically, and Kyle should know this, jails will hold someone primarily when they're sentenced to under a year. And if it's something over than a year in their sentence, they'll go off to prison. Things have changed a little bit over the years where some of the lower level offenses, if it's going to be around a year or two, they'll keep them locally and put them on house arrest, community corrections, or in probation. So there are other alternatives to prison at the state level, oftentimes. Drug-related criminal offenders oftentimes have a diagnosis. I don't know if there are any psychology majors in here, but the DSM-4 is a way to diagnose individuals for substance abuse, for drug dependence and abuse. So when they look at state prisoners, 58% of state prisoners have that diagnosis. That's a psychological diagnosis that they look at for abuse or dependence. And then 63% of jail inmates, like I said, the difference between staying local in the jails or going off to the prisons, those jail inmates, 63% have that diagnosis of dependence and abuse. Those individuals who indicate upon arrest that they were under the influence or when they're being processed into jail, they oftentimes will ask them, were you under the influence of any kind of substances at the time of your offense? And 42% of state prisoners said that they were, and those going into jails, about 47 or 37% will say, yes, I was under the influence of some intoxicating substance during the time of my arrest. So again, this is just kind of giving you a background and showing you the prevalence of drug use and alcohol use that is kind of combining with the criminal justice system. There are also other related offenders that maybe weren't under the influence at the time of their offense and charged with maybe an operating while intoxicated, while driving, but they're committing their crimes to obtain substances. So those would be considered property crimes, where they would be stealing something, burglarizing a home to take that property that they gain from that criminal act to go and buy drugs or trade that for drugs and substances. And 80% of those who are arrested indicate that they have some type of alcohol or drug misuse. So they are either using substances that are not prescribed to them, or they don't claim that they have an addiction, but they're misusing substances, primarily alcohol and primarily drugs. So problem-solving courts. Has anybody heard of the term problem-solving courts or specialty courts? A couple of you have? Okay. They are looking at reducing some of the overpopulation of the prisons or the criminal justice system, that they have special needs that the typical criminal justice system cannot handle. So primarily what started in the problem-solving courts was drug court. That was about the first, I guess, specialized court that came about when they wanted to look at dealing with the underlying problem that is causing somebody to get into trouble with the law. So there are juvenile courts, there are adult drug courts that still kind of handle the problem similarly. They're looking at the underlying issue of substance use or abuse. There's also mental health courts So individuals, because of their mental health condition or disorder, they continue to get either arrested, or they're just having trouble staying out of the system. So mental health, they're addressing those underlying mental health issues. OWI courts and DUI courts, those are operating while intoxicated, driving while intoxicated. Most jurisdictions will combine those into their drug courts. Allen County also has drug and alcohol offenses, but some jurisdictions are big enough that they can separate them. They can put their alcohol offenders in their own court and deal with their issues. Domestic violence court. Again, a lot of domestic violence cases go through the system. There's a lot of treatment that may be needed for them. There's support. They also work with the victims of domestic violence, so they give them some resources that they might be helpful for them. Community courts, that's something, it's a newer concept. It's not in all jurisdictions, but a community comes together, and it could be in a room like this in the neighboring community where there's maybe some problems, or maybe some juveniles who are doing some graffiti or just causing problems. They would bring them into a court with community members, and they would help them address the issues and help them understand what they're doing and get them resources, kind of diverting them from the court system or the juvenile system. And then homelessness courts. That's a brand new concept. It hasn't been around very long, but there is a homeless problem everywhere, unfortunately, and it is providers that help provide resources to the homeless to maybe get them jobs or get them housing, that they can, again, refrain from committing any kind of offenses that put them into the criminal justice system. So primarily I'm going to be talking about the drug courts. And the drug courts, again, it's a response to the overcrowding of the prisons. Sometimes court dockets get very, very large. Someone can maybe commit an offense and not get their day in court for a couple months, maybe not go to trial for several months. Homicide cases, oftentimes there's a lot of court congestion. Those will get pushed back. So to kind of overcome some of those issues, drug courts are the specialty court that is providing the services that are needed to kind of keep the courts from having to be overburdened with some of these cases. So in Miami-Dade County, Florida, that's where the very first drug court started in 1989. Again, they were having a huge drug problem and overcrowding of their prisons. And as of 2015, there are over 3,100 drug courts throughout the United States. So it's a short period of time. It's grown. When they first started, the federal government provided a lot of financial assistance and grants to get the drug courts started, and then they eventually have been able to sustain their own funding. So what exactly are drug courts? Drug courts it's a voluntary program. People who are referred to the drug court program can choose to participate or not. They're given that option. I'll go through the referral process of how they get there, but no one is forced to participate in drug court. Even if they choose at the very beginning that they want to participate in drug court, if they're into it for a couple months and they just think, okay, this isn't for me, I would rather just go back into the criminal justice system, they can withdraw from the program. They don't have to stay in drug court. It's holistic. What I mean by that is it looks at all of the issues that someone might be having that is leading them into a life of crime, or a poor choice that caused them to commit an offense that put them into the criminal justice system. So some of that might be they don't have a job, or they can't keep a job, or they don't have sufficient housing, or again, the mental health issues. There are co-occurring disorders that affect a lot of the clients that have substance abuse as well as mental health disorders. So it's coping skills, it's life skills. A lot of folks don't have a high school education. So it's looking at those needs that they may have to get them resources and services to maybe get their GED, to give them some job training, to help them get a job to sustain. Some of them are parenting classes. So there are folks that come into the program that could use some skills to help with their parenting. So once they are involved in the drug court program, there is a case manager that is assigned to them who oversees their case management plan, who refers them out for treatment to various resources in the community. It's intensive supervision, so they are constantly meeting with their case manager. They're also submitting to drug screens very frequently to get them clean. That's kind of the first step, is to get them away from the substances, get them away from the folks that they are using with, get them out of the environment that's contributing to their substance use and abuse, as well as frequent court appearances. So they are meeting with the judge. And there is one judge that oversees the drug court program that they meet with very frequently, who gets to know them, that gets to know their case, and has a very personal connection with them, knowing how they're progressing, knowing if they're sliding back a little bit. So they're constantly in front of the judge with progress reports. So as far as the Allen County criminal justice system, it started in 1997. It started with 35 clients that very first year, and that next year there were 6 successful completions. Typically the drug court program will last about 18 to 24 months. It depends on the client, how they're progressing, the services that they're getting, and so that first year they had 6 successful completions. It was a little bit different back when it first started. There were usually first-time offenders, very low offenders, mainly possession of substances, and over the years it's really expanded to most crimes. It could be anything from a possession of a large amount to a dealing in the substance to writing fraudulent scripts to get substances from a pharmacy to prostitution. Because oftentimes prostitutes are using substances and it's kind of a vicious cycle, so getting them clean and drug-free, they can stop that activity. So it's a wide variety of individuals who are referred. And to date, there have been 829 successful completions of the drug court program, which is very, very good. And right now, there's about 175 participants that are currently in the program. So you'll have some coming in, and then you'll have some successfully completing, but that's about an average right now of the number of participants that drug court is working with. The photo on the right, just to kind of give you a perspective, the woman second in from the left, that is Judge Fran Gall. She is the one who is currently overseeing the drug court program. The one to the left of her is the Executive Director of Criminal Division Services. So if you kind of look at the Superior Court is over Criminal Division Services, and there is drug court in criminal division services. There's alcohol countermeasures program for misdemeanor OWIs and drug offense supervision, and there's also pretrial services. So when somebody is arrested, oftentimes they can post a bond or they can be released on their own recognizance, and they're supervised by a court department, which is called pretrial services. So the individual on the left is the executive director. The woman second from the right is the assistant executive director. The individual in the middle, I guess third from the left, his name is West Huddleston. West is the former director of the National Association of Drug Court Professionals. He has a history. In his younger day, he had substance issues, and he then progressed through treatment and has run the association for many years. He's also a researcher, a writer. He does a lot of work. He came in for the drug court graduation which they have twice a year. For those who successfully complete the program, they'll have a graduation ceremony for them. It's a pretty big deal. A lot of folks that work in the criminal justice system, police officers, the chief of police, the sheriff will often attend these drug court graduations. And you've got the clients who are grateful, and they will say to the chief of police in the back of the room, "Thank you for, arresting me. You saved my life." And there's great stories to share that the clients will share with the public. They'll have support system, family. Sometimes they have sponsors, those who attend AA meetings or various support group meetings. Their sponsors will sit in the audience, and it's really a wonderful opportunity to see the hard work that they've gone through, but a lot of times it's reuniting with their families. So it really is, and if anybody is interested, I can tell you when the next one is. It's a really neat opportunity, but they will thank police for arresting them, which is pretty rare to have somebody do that. So he came in as a special keynote speaker for the last graduation ceremony. The gentleman to the right of him would be Doug Ulmer, and he is a public defender, defense attorney who represents the clients on the drug court program. And then the gentleman on the far right is a treatment provider. Again, former recovering individual who went on to schooling and is now a substance abuse therapist. And he sits on the team, and I'll talk a little bit about the team, the drug court team. So Allen County's drug court program has a mission. And that mission primarily, just hitting the highlights, drug and alcohol prevention and treatment, which is critical. That's their focus, as well as having a structured judiciary. And the judiciary is the judge. And so they have found that through evidence-based research, that having that continual contact with a judicial officer, in our case, Judge Gull, really helps enforce and encourages the participants to be successful and to want to complete the program and get sober. But she'll also hold them accountable if in fact they violate one of the conditions or they relapse. But the team understands relapse, and they know that there can be issues with that. And preventing, curtailing, and ending the abuse of alcohol, along with the criminal activity that comes with that. So again, they're breaking the law, but oftentimes the underlier is that they have the abuse and the addiction. And again, I spoke about the holistic approach. So looking at that individual holistically at all the issues that they may have that can be addressed by the drug court program. They also work in wonderful collaboration with outside resources. So there are the mental health providers, the substance abuse treatment providers, transitional living facilities for individuals, and some of you may know them as halfway houses. They'll refer to them sometimes as halfway houses, but they are really a supportive environment, a safe environment. A lot of individuals there are going through a similar situation, so they can have someone to talk to that understands kind of what they're going through. They also hold lots of meetings, support group meetings, life skills meetings. They are just a wonderful resource for the community in Allen County for referrals, and drug court case managers will refer them to these various agencies. Educational. They, like I mentioned, a lot of folks may not have a high school diploma, so they provide services and connect them with services for GED classes so they can obtain their GED. They can provide them with the parenting classes that I mentioned before, as well as working with other criminal justice agencies. So you've got your court, you've got your judicial aspect, but then you're also working very closely with the prosecuting attorney's office. You're working with the public defender's office. You're working with adult probation, because some probationers may get put on, they may violate their probation and get put on drug court to satisfy that probation requirement because of the intensity and the treatment that they would be getting, as well as working with law enforcement. So law enforcement does understand drug court. They come and they watch the graduation ceremonies, so they know that sometimes what they're doing out there making these arrests will make a difference in these folks' lives, so they can watch them progress through the system. So there are eligibility guidelines that dictate whether or not someone would even be referred to the drug court program. Those are state mandated through the legislation for these guidelines. So they should be a resident of Allen County or the county wherever the drug court may be. There's several reasons for that, but there are some exceptions. So what you would want to have somebody in your county to be close to the court system. Sometimes they don't have a driver's license. Maybe it was suspended because it was an OWI that they were charged with. Sometimes it could be that they just don't have good transportation and they have to get to their meetings with their case manager. They have to get to court. They have to do their drug screens. So it's very convenient for them to live in and near the county that they are under supervision. But there are occasions, maybe they live in an adjacent county, maybe they're in Whitley County or Adams County, someplace very close, but they do have reliable transportation, or they have somebody that can bring them into their meetings. So it's convenience for both. There's also an aspect of doing home visits. So like I mentioned, I was a field officer when I was with the drug court program, so I would go out and go into their homes and make sure it was safe, make sure that they didn't have any substances or anything that they shouldn't have, that it was a clean environment, that they had support there in their home, just to make sure that that's going to help their recovery as they continue in the program. So having it close is really important. They need to be 18 years of age or older in the adult Allen County Drug Court program. We do not have a juvenile program here, but anyone under 18 in some jurisdictions could be in that juvenile drug court. They need to be a legal resident of the United States, no serious felony prior convictions. They need to be willing to comply with the drug court rules and regulations. So there are a lot of regulations under supervision from the court, and they have to ensure that they're willing to comply with all of that, to come in and do their drug screens, to appear in court, to not possess any firearms or anything like that, to not have any substances, and submit to the drug screens when asked. The current offense could not be a forcible felony. So a forcible felony would be a threat or an action against another person in a violent manner. So those are monitored. And then no other pending cases. So they cannot have a pending case in Ohio, get arrested in Allen County, and have that dual supervision. There are some occasions where they can satisfy whatever they had in another county, either serve their time, and then maybe come into the drug court program and delay that entry. So there are exceptions sometimes to these, and do not possess a firearm during the crime that they were referred to drug court for. The eligibility, once they determine that they may be eligible to participate in the program, the prosecuting attorney's office will review their case, make that determination whether or not they feel that they would be a good candidate to be screened for participation in the drug court program. So once they are referred to drug court, a case manager will conduct an assessment. The assessment is pretty intensive. It could take anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half to get through the entire assessment, but you're really looking at, again, that holistic person, that individual who is, coming into the system. What kind of biological issues do they have? Do they have parents that were addicted to substances? Do they, when did they first start using? That makes a difference. If they were starting to use at 12, 13 years old, they're going to need more help. They're going to need more support, more treatment. Psychological issues. Do they have mental health issues? Do they have something that needs to be addressed to help them stabilize and be able to, comply with those regulations and rules of the program? And socially. What are they looking at? What's their home situation? Are they in a good relationship? Are they in a bad relationship? Do they have any friends? Do they have somebody that can help support them or transport them? So there's a lot of factors that go into looking at these individuals. First of all, they're looking for eligibility. They're also looking at what kind of services can we provide to this person to help them be successful and complete this program. So once an assessment's conducted, then the case managers will meet with the drug court team, and I'll talk a little bit more in detail about the team, but everybody kind of weighs in. They give them information about the assessment. They also want to know, is this person willing to participate in this program? Do they want to comply? What are their reasons for wanting the program? Do they think it's a get out of jail free card? Do they think that I need help, nobody's helped me before, or I haven't had any resources? What is their motivation for wanting to be in the program? So that's staffed with the team. The team kind of weighs in on that, but ultimately the judge has the final determination on whether or not they're going to be able to participate in the program. I just know from my experience, if there's a willingness, we'll make it work. We will allow them to participate in the program if they really want the help and the services that can be provided to them. So that drug court, oh yeah, you have a question.
When you refer to the assessment on that
Yes.
slide,
Uh-huh.
are you referring to like the standard academic assessment that like a CCM certified person would do?
Yes, yes, you're familiar with CSAMs. Yes, that's all involved in that. It's like a 26-page assessment. So we are doing a CSAMs. We are looking at other factors, but yes, we are looking at making a determination of whether or not they're abusing, whether they are just recreational. So it definitely does have a full assessment of that. So the drug court team that would be reviewing the assessment and making that determination, and who meets and gives input on all of the clients, whether they're assigned to you or not, would be the judge. The Superior Court judge oversees. Then I mentioned the executive director and the assistant director of criminal division services, the case managers and field officers, so they're all there. Then the deputy prosecuting attorney. There's typically one who is assigned to the drug court program that would show up every week, and they would be responsible for representing the state of Indiana at these hearings in court, as well as on the drug court team. Also a deputy public defender. One, again, I mentioned Mr. Ulmer is responsible for representing the clients and being there for them. Even if they're being revoked from the program, he will represent them to ensure that their rights are safe. And then the adult probation also has a role in that, and being on the team and giving input for some of those clients that come from probation. Treatment and mental health professionals are also on the team, as well as support group facilitators. I had mentioned before, there's support groups, AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, NA, Narcotics Anonymous. There are a lot of support groups that are being held throughout the community. There are a couple individuals who just work with the drug court clients because, again, nobody can really understand what you're going through better than somebody who's in your similar situation. So there are individuals who run those support groups that serve on the team. Okay. As far as the process, the drug court program accepts misdemeanor and felony offenses. So someone may have an operating while intoxicated, a misdemeanor offense. They could be considered eligible for the program because their use and abuse is causing problems in their lives. Did you have a question?
Is that new?
No.
That someone can qualify with just felony level cases?
I'm sorry?
That someone can qualify for drug court with just felony level?
With felony or misdemeanor.
Okay.
that it takes, it doesn't matter the level of offense. They will accept them into the program if there is a need, if they find that there is abuse and issues in their life that's caused by their substance. Absolutely, they'll accept both. Again, it's voluntary, so once they're referred, once they have their assessment, they could, say, you know what, I changed my mind, I don't think this is for me, or they can accept it. They can accept eligibility into the program. What is considered a post-plea pre-conviction. So what that means is that if somebody is accepted into the program, they're willing to participate in the program, they will go before the judge and they will plead guilty to their charges. Whatever their charge may be, they would plead guilty, but they're not sentenced. So they have not received a conviction. It's deferred. The conviction would be deferred. So they plead guilty at the front end. Providing that they successfully complete all the requirements of the program, then their charges can either be dismissed or reduced. It could go from maybe a felony OWI, operating while intoxicated, maybe because they were charged because they had a prior conviction, or maybe they had a child in the vehicle, that may be reduced to a misdemeanor offense, or if they have a possession of cocaine, for example, if they successfully complete the program, that possession case would be dismissed at the end. So they are pleading guilty, but providing that they do everything that they're supposed to do and successfully complete the program, their charges would either be dismissed or reduced. After they plead guilty, if they choose not to participate in the program any longer, or if they decide that they commit another offense and the drug court team decides that they need to revoke them from the program, then they would go right to sentencing. So they have that conviction then. So is everybody kind of clear on that? Okay. And then
I'm sorry, in Allen County, is drug court sometimes used purely as an alternative to incarceration, or does it always result in a reduced or dismissed charge or successfully completed?
The intent is to always have it result in a reduced or dismissed charge. So I guess I don't understand an alternative to incarceration.
Well, like in my county, for instance, unless it's a conditional discharge, that case is not going to get dismissed, even if you complete drug court. It's not
Okay.
gonna get dismissed.
So yours is post-conviction.
Always, yes.
Okay.
And it's not voluntary.
Okay.
So I guess in my county, it's just purely an alternative to incarceration.
Okay.
They're not dismissing a case, they're not doing any of that.
And that could be the case here for the probation revocations. Like I mentioned, sometimes if somebody is revoked or probation, they violate their conditions of probation, because probation is post-conviction. So once somebody is convicted of an offense, they can either go to prison or jail, or they can be put on probation. If they violate that probation, then they could go to jail or prison. So that's post-conviction. Sometimes we will take those. They violated, but instead of going to prison, they will take some of those probationers on drug court, and they get a satisfactory release of their probation. But the premise of the Allen County Drug Court program is that pre-conviction, post-plea pre-conviction, where they would get their reduction or their dismissal. I'm curious, what county?
DeKalb.
DeKalb? Okay.
It's actually a commission of probation in DeKalb County.
Okay.
So our drug court is all post-conviction.
Yep. That's fascinating. Okay. But twice a year, they have the graduation ceremonies in May and December. So one's coming up. If anybody is interested in attending, I can certainly get you information for that. But it is a really exciting time for the case managers, because they put in a lot of work to watch the clients succeed in the program. And for some folks that maybe never graduated from high school, that have never been through any kind of graduation ceremony, it's really exciting. And they know how hard they work to successfully complete that program. So it really is a wonderful experience. So I'd be happy to give you information on that. So again, kind of backing up to my timeline, I worked at the prosecutor's office, then I went to the drug court program. I was there for 7 years. While I was there, I started teaching as an adjunct instructor at the University of St. Francis. And then 3 years ago, they started a brand new criminal justice and criminology program that I was hired to be the director of. And Kyle was one of my first students coming through the new program. And so I kind of turned and left the drug court program, working full-time at St. Francis at that point, but I still love drug courts, and I still love being connected to them and the folks that I've worked with for 25 years in the criminal justice system. And I was given an opportunity to do a recidivism study for drug court. They had never had a full long-term recidivism study for about 20 years. And so they reached out to me and they asked me to conduct a study for them to kind of look at the outcomes and to see whether or not drug courts are working, whether or not Allen County Drug Court is successful. Is it beneficial? Is it cost effective? So there were a lot of issues that they were looking at. But one of those components, and these were the questions in my research that I looked at, does successful completion, those who successfully complete the drug court program, does that reduce recidivism compared to those who do not participate in the drug court program? So they're getting all this treatment, they're getting all this support, they're getting all this, where somebody else may have just gone to prison, or maybe somebody else was just on standard probation. So we wanted to look at those who successfully completed had a lower recidivism rate, and those who had, our recidivism rates lower for those who had at least a little bit of participation. Maybe they participated for a few months, but then were revoked, or they decided that they just didn't want to participate in the program any longer. So that was kind of my mission, to work with the program and look at statistics to find out whether or not drug courts work. So I keep throwing out that word recidivism, don't I? Does anybody know what that means? Look at Kyle, because he's been in many of my classes. It's reoffending, basically. It's somebody who has been through the system before, they've been adjudicated, they've completed whatever sentence they had previously been given, and then they go on to commit another crime. And so for the study that we looked at, some studies look at different rates of recidivism. Some look at how far, let's say 2 years out. We looked at 3 years out. Some studies also look at, was this a new conviction or was this a new arrest? So we decided we wanted to look at whether or not just a new arrest was made by somebody who had previously been in the system. So that's kind of how we defined our recidivism for the study. So just to give you an idea, the federal government, your hard-earned taxes, go to a lot of programs, a lot of initiatives, and the United States National Drug Control budget for 1 year was $31.1 billion to law enforcement to help combat the drugs and the substances in our community. It also goes to treatment, because some treatment is funded by federal money. It also looks at interdiction, the officers that are out, maybe burning fields of marijuana, or looking at maybe what's coming into our country. So there's a lot of money that's expended just to address substances in our country. So studies have indicated that for every dollar that is invested into a drug court program, you're going to get a $2 to $4 return on that investment in savings that is not spent on the criminal justice system to deal with those substances. So basically, if you figure that out, it's going to be $3,000 to $22,000 per individual who does not reoffend. That's what we're saving. So that's pretty good money, right? So when I looked at the study, and I looked at those who successfully completed the program and did not reoffend within those 3 years, The statistic that I came up with is basically the Allen County government saved anywhere from $795,000 to $5.8 million over that time frame, if in fact you're looking at dollar per dollar savings. It's very expensive for the criminal justice system, if anything, even to house somebody in prison. It can cost up to, what's your tuition a year? It can be your tuition a year. It could be anywhere from $22,000 to house one person in a prison, to some East Coast prisons can run up into close to $50,000 a year. It's pretty substantial when you look at what it costs just to house somebody for 1 year. So if you can avoid that, that's a good thing, right? You're saving all kinds of money. So when I looked at this study and I looked at the participants that we were wanting to address and see where they are today, we looked at a 10-year period of time. So it started back in 2004. That's when we started looking at clients that came into the program in 2004 up until through 2013. And why we stopped at 2013 is to look at that 3 years of possible recidivism from the last person that would have had contact with the drug court program. So I started this in 2017, looking back. So I looked at 2,109 individuals who had any kind of contact with the drug court program. And that contact could have been maybe they were referred to the drug court program and were found ineligible based on those eligibility guidelines, or they were referred and said, you know what, this isn't for me, I'll just do my time, or I'll just go on probation or something like that. So those who successfully completed the program, I looked at them, there were 339 of those during that 10-year period that successfully completed. So they, did what they needed to do, they finished the program, they were very successful. Then 490 of those individuals who had any contact declined. They said, I don't want to do it for a variety of reasons. I live out of county, or, whatever. There's lots of reasons why somebody might decline the program. Then there were 813 ineligible. So they either had outstanding charges someplace else, they, maybe had a forcible felony, maybe they had a prior serious violent felony. There was a variety. We've had some that were not U.S. citizens that were found ineligible to participate. So it could have been a variety of reasons why. Or some of them, maybe they just didn't show up for their assessment and took off. So they would be found ineligible for the program. 421 were revoked during that period of time. So they either violated the terms of their conditions. Some of them took off. Once they're out of custody, sometimes they think, okay, I'm out of here. Thank you for getting me out, and just don't show up for their meetings or to the court. So there were quite a few of those, and then only 46 actually withdrew, which we kind of thought was interesting, that so few folks that were in the program decided that they just didn't want to do it anymore. So that was kind of an interesting fact that we found out right at the beginning. Better check my watch here. Okay. So when I looked at the total number of participants, again, 2,109, that is ingrained in my head because that's who I was dealing with. I looked at all of their cases. I looked at, there is a variety of criminal justice reporting systems. There's Odyssey, which is a state court system. Everybody has access to Odyssey. You can go on, mycase.com and see, your friends and check them out, which that is a public access. But I also had access to some law enforcement databases. I had access to a lot of information that the public doesn't have, but I wanted to know, has anybody been arrested in Allen County, outside the county, anywhere in the state, anywhere in the United States? So I had the ability to track that. So it was a nationwide search to see if anybody that had participated or had contact had a new arrest. So it was pretty time consuming, but it was interesting because a lot of the folks in the study were my old clients. So I kind of wanted to know what they were doing, you know, after those 3 years. It's like, okay, how are they doing? And fortunately, a lot of mine were fairly well behaved, so I was pleased with that. Also, when I looked at those who had new arrest, of all of the 2,109, 52% had a new arrest. That could have been anything from a misdemeanor up to a felony. So I looked at all of those to see if in fact there was a new arrest. I didn't look at traffic citations, I didn't look at anything like that. It was just had to be a misdemeanor arrest. The successful completion, only 22% of them recidivated. Only 22% had a new arrest within that period of time. All other categories, and those were, like I mentioned, ineligible, declined, withdraw, or revoked, 57% of those had a new arrest as a group, as a whole. So I was pretty pleased with those statistics, thinking, okay, drug courts, look at how low that recidivism rate is. It's actually 21.8%, but you know how you round up. So very, very different in the statistics. Yeah.
When you were tracking new arrests, did you confine it to any specific geographic area, or was it any new arrest anywhere in the country?
Any new arrest anywhere in the country. I ran III, which you may be familiar with, and so that does, it's through the FBI and it's reporting, so whatever law enforcement agency reports to them, I can tell. So again, there's some that probably were missed, but especially the Allen County one, and a lot of folks, they don't venture too far. They were pretty much going to stay closer to their jurisdiction. A few did, and we did find some arrests out in California and Arizona, and there were some out there, but primarily the ones that we would find would be local or in this general area, Latin DeKalb County, Whitley County, some of the outlying counties. So again, just kind of a graph showing the total number of arrests for participants. 52% of those did have a new offense. Like I mentioned, the misdemeanor versus a felony. I also broke it down into how many are arrested for misdemeanors, how many are arrested for the felonies, and far more felony arrests occurred during that period of time, which was also interesting because the successful completers were the only categories that had more misdemeanor arrests than felony arrests. So when you're looking at that total, that was for all groups, but when you broke it down into individual categories, the successful completers are the only ones that had more misdemeanors. So again, that's kind of telling you, okay, maybe those who successfully completed didn't commit those more serious crimes. They were the less serious crimes. Again, just kind of breaking them down by categories, you get a feel. The ineligibles, substantially more of the felony arrests. Yeah, question?
Maybe you're going to address this in a couple slides, but I'm just wondering if you were able to tease out to what extent, instead of measuring the efficacy of drug courts, are you measuring whether the higher level of reoffense by those who declined, are you measuring motivation or hope? And with the ineligible ones, are you comparing apples to really bad apples?
I think I know where you're going with that, and I didn't dive that far into the data. That's for another study.
All right.
Okay, but this is kind of overview. Outcome overview. But I do break it down into categories. I also break it down into drug of choice, demographics, things like that. So, but yeah, I didn't look at motivation because I didn't go into each individual. I didn't have contact with any of these folks. Mm-hmm. This is all database. This is all historical data that I pulled based on their participation in the program and new arrests. So there wasn't any kind of follow-up. Or exit surveys or anything that they had, if that makes sense to you. Okay. And then the offense type. So I looked at what those new offenses were. And I primarily took the highest offense. So if they were charged with a felony as well as a misdemeanor in the same case, I would look at the felony. So drug and alcohol by far were the most reoccurring new offenses for all of the categories, followed closely by the violent nonviolent, and the violent could be a domestic battery, which I did find a lot of those were some of the newer offenses, along with the traffic and a few guns. And typically the guns were carrying a handgun without a license. So those were primarily what those gun-related offenses were. But again, half of the new arrests were drug or alcohol related. So again, looking at the drug or alcohol related offenses by category, successful completion, they had the highest level of rearrest for drug and alcohol, and those who withdrew had the highest percentage of new arrests that were not drug or alcohol, if that makes sense. You're kind of back there with the scales. Oh, okay, I didn't know if you had a question. But again, that kind of just gives you an idea of which categories were committing the drug and alcohol related, and then those who committed other offenses. And then the drug of choice. During the assessment, that is one of the questions that is asked. What is your drug of choice? What is your primary drug of choice? Some folks will have a secondary, a third, a fourth, but I just looked at the drug of choice that they provided during the assessment. There were some that were unknown. If they didn't even show up for their assessment, I didn't have any information on them. But as you can see, marijuana is the #1 drug of choice for all of those in that study. Then next would be the alcohol. It kind of went down as far as usage, the opiates. Again, this study stopped in 2013. I can tell you now, just based on the opioid epidemic that we are seeing in our country, opiates are by far becoming one of the primary drugs of choice for drug court participants. So that is not reflective of what's going on now. There will be more studies to look at that, but this, at the time, marijuana was primary, and it still is a very popular drug of choice. Things are changing a little bit with the laws. I know that, I'm sure you're aware that some of the states are decriminalizing them. They are also bringing in the medicinal marijuana and also recreational marijuana. It's not going to happen in Indiana anytime soon. I'm pretty sure of that. Again, just kind of breaking it down, giving you the picture of what we're looking at. And there are quite a bit of unknowns that were involved in this, but marijuana by far is still running the lead. Another interesting conclusion that I found with the study is that alcohol was the most prevalent among those who successfully completed the program. Like I showed with the chart, that marijuana stood out, but when you broke it down into individuals, those who successfully completed the program, alcohol was their drug of choice. Everybody else was marijuana for all the other categories. So again, that was kind of interesting, kind of surprising to me that there would be such a difference in that. Again, breaking it down by categories, when you're looking at marijuana, the ineligibles definitely had the highest percentage of use of marijuana. Then going down into the unknowns, quite substantial. Those who decline the program typically will not get an assessment, so you don't know what their substance is. Yeah.
This is just an opinion question.
Okay.
But with alcohol being the most successful, do you think that has anything to do with that being a legal controlled substance as compared to all of the other ones that are illegal in their entirety?
I don't think having it as a legal substance really has that much impact on being the drug of choice for successful completion. I think what comes down to that is some of the folks that were in the program for misdemeanor offenses, for operating while intoxicated, sometimes their motivation, and going back to motivation, is that maybe they are a truck driver and they have a CDL license, or they need their license for their job, so they are extra motivated to comply with the requirements and successfully complete the program because of that, getting their job back, or being able to get their license back so they can continue with their job. I think that's, I guess, my take on it, but that's a really good question. Good job. And then I looked at gender. I kind of broke it down by gender, looking at the participants. So 69% of those total participants were male, and then the 31% were female. So that was kind of an interesting breakdown, especially when we looked at the statistics for the federal incarceration rates, being primarily females as opposed to males. And then based on category, again, huge discrepancy in the ineligibles, finding that primarily those individuals were male, where the withdraws were a little more similar in their gender. And also the demographic breakdown, those successfully completed, they're pretty similar, but when you look at the highest prevalence, the ineligible, like you saw in the graph, were a higher percentage, and those who withdrew, a higher percentage of females. So again, it's just some interesting information to see the dynamics of the folks that were participating in the program. Then we broke down by ethnicity, and we categorized the white, the African American, and other. The other, as you can tell, 130, the others were Hispanic. They were Pacific Islanders, and I'm blanking on the next one. I'll get to that slide. They were Pacific Islanders, Native Americans. So those were the three categories that we had in the other group. But again, you break it down. You noticing anything as far as with that ineligible group? That very similar in the numbers for both white and African American. The successful completions, quite a lower discrepancy between the African Americans and the whites. So, and then in the withdrawal, there's one little one over there for the other. So when, again, you break that down, you look at the most prevalent percentage amongst all of the categories. You've got successful completion, 79% of those were white. And you look at the ineligibles, which had the highest prevalence of African American and other in that category. So I wanted to kind of look at whether or not those with an education, a higher education, or even just completing a high school diploma had any bearing on whether or not they would successfully complete the program. So this is just a breakdown looking at all 2,109 individuals who were in the program, where they were. So less than a high school education, high school graduate, but that also included those with a GED. So I categorized those together. Some college or vocational education, those who had a college degree, and those that were unknown because they were never assessed. Yes?
Did you look at all at like socioeconomic status?
I didn't go that deep. This was me doing this study. I would love to do more of that, and I'm fascinated by that. But I have all the data. I kept all the data. Even as I was going through it, I was like taking notes for future studies because those are things that I want to know about, that interests me. But they kind of just wanted the bare bones assessment to see, what we're looking at, and then be able to take this data and dig a lot deeper into, what are some of those factors that help contribute to successfully completing the program. And yeah, socioeconomic is one of those. But we did look at some of these as far as the educational factors, and I just know from my experience, we've had folks that were surgeons, we've had pharmacists, we've had nurses, any profession, any level of education. Addiction does not discriminate. And so it can affect anybody. It's across the board who can be suffering from substance abuse and addiction. It's, anybody can. So then breaking it down by category, those ineligibles, quite a few high school graduates, less than a high school education, those who successfully completed, you're looking at about 64 of those. So when you look kind of at the variations, those who withdrew, a lesser amount of education, and again, those who are unknown, but there are quite a few that have a college degree. When you look at that, the highest percentage would be those who successfully completed the program. And so kind of breaking that chart down, when you look at the highest prevalence in all of the categories, those with some college and those with a college degree belong to the successful completion. Those with a, on the next slide, will be the most prevalent. The revoked, 47% of those were high school graduates, and those who withdrew, the highest percentage of not having a high school education. Is anybody kind of surprised by the information? Kind of goes along with maybe what you were thinking, that lacking the education kind of doesn't contribute to successful completion of the program. And then I looked at age ranges. It went from 18 to 70. So again, you have across the board folks that are working, towards their sobriety, getting into the system, but you can also look at the graph on where predominantly that age range is. The folks from 18 to 26, 25. Those of you who have a little bit of psychology background know that frontal lobe is still developing. That decision making and making those poor decisions can lead them into that lifestyle. And age at the time of initial contact. So breaking it down, the average age of those who successfully completed the program, 34. And that the lowest age tied with the revoked and the withdrawals, that being the younger age. And then kind of broke it down the most prevalent ages within each of those categories. So again, the older individuals kind of were up there with the successful completions. The younger they got, those who were revoked and withdrew from the program, they gave it a shot, but they just didn't complete the program. And then looking at the statistical correlation. So we did run some statistics on these. A lot of it, there was no correlation, but these two categories actually did have some type of correlation with statistics. So those who declined the program, the higher their age, the lower the recidivism. And those who were found ineligible, the higher the age, the higher the level of education, the lower the recidivism. So when you kind of look at the ability to, how can we help these folks be successful? How can we help them, with success in overcoming the addiction and completing the program? A lot of it comes with maturity and age, but there's also a component of, getting that education, having more possibility to be successful, getting the education, getting that better job, and kind of coming back to the socioeconomics. That all kind of plays into it. And I've read lots of research that have delved into the socioeconomic factors. And having a job, having a stable family, marriage actually contributes to better success rate of staying out of the system. Some of these folks age out of the system. They're making these poor decisions at a young age. They start being responsible, and that kind of keeps them out of the system. Yeah.
When they're in the process of drug court, is there like a job job requirement if they have
Yes.
employment?
Yes, or be working towards that. We had some folks that were disabled, that weren't able to work. So if they were capable, we would ask them to complete community service. So we would refer them out to community service agencies to complete community service in lieu of working, because maybe they were on disability or something like that. So they had some kind of income. But those who are able-bodied and can find a job, they are strongly encouraged to obtain employment, and we help them with that. We refer them out to jobs, we refer them to job training, Work One. There are various agencies around the community where we would refer the clients to get some help. There's also Blue Jacket, and I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with Blue Jacket, but the individual who runs Blue Jacket is a USF graduate. He started it through the Community Corrections Program for offenders returning to the county after serving time in prison, which is very difficult for folks to get a job with a felony conviction fresh out of prison. So he started this agency where they would provide job skill training, interviewing techniques, and clothing. So Blue Jacket is kind of known at this point for their clothing bank, where you can go and you can get an interview suit or an interview outfit that you can go and be presentable for your interviews. So there's a lot of those type of skills and agencies available. So kind of to wrap this up, I also was very curious for those who did not participate in the drug court program and went on to either serve their time in prison or that they were on probation, home detention. I kind of wanted to know what the resolution was for that case, that original case that they were referred to drug court on. How well did they succeed at any other kind of alternative sentencing or incarceration? So when I looked at this, I looked at whether or not they were revoked, either from probation, from home detention, did they violate once they were finished with parole, maybe they were served their time, came out into the community on parole. Reentry court, again, that's another specialty where they serve some time in prison, but providing that they're compliant and they're doing everything that they need to do, they may get their sentence cut down a little bit, but once they're released, they go through reentry court. And that's continued supervision with a judge and monitored by a case manager. 44% of those who did not successfully complete drug court did not successfully complete their other component for their sentence or any kind of court supervision. So they, pretty high recidivism rate for them even and being revoked. And for those categories, again, the ineligibles more predominantly were not successful with whatever supervision that they were assigned to afterwards. And that is my presentation.